Hello and welcome to week 5 of the FUT Weekly podcast. This is a gameplay pod. Looking forward to getting into it. Lots to talk about this week. We start off, as we so often do, with Japes. Welcome back to the pod.
Thank you very much, Ben. Though I didn't venture into champs, had my brother in town this weekend. I have been slowly but surely, well, not slowly but surely because of not winning games, but slowly but surely climbing divisions. So starting to feel like I'm getting a grip on gameplay here.
Yeah, it was similar for me actually. I did play champs this weekend though and felt a lot more comfortable with the game. First weekend, obviously it's tricky because opposition quality can be quite high, but I didn't feel in a rhythm, whereas this weekend, much more comfortable. Went from 13 wins last weekend to a fairly comfortable 16 wins. Played the 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 that Taz mentioned on the Supporter Gameplay podcast last week and felt, although I've been playing high depth before, the extra aggression from playing press after heavy touch was really helpful actually. But anyway, we should introduce our next guest, who is Rannerz, coach and pro. Was it a 20-0 weekend for you last weekend?
It was indeed, Ben, so that was pretty nice.
Congrats.
Especially after last weekend, I actually got 18-2, so just missing out on rank 1 was painful. But this week, we had some lovely, easy games, flew through it. Actually got in Haaland to fully play the meta, and worked out incredibly well.
Nice. And we also have with us, and first of all, actually, we should say congratulations to 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦, who got married, what was it, a week or two ago now?
Yeah, almost 2 weeks now. Probably by the time people are listening to it, it'll be 2 weeks. It was a nice week and a half in Palm Springs out in California, some warm weather. So unwinded from FUT a bit, although I was still on the web app and companion app probably every day. So, can't ever put it away fully. But,
This is a publicly available episode, I should say.
As I like to tell my wife, you know what you married. So feel free to adopt that line.
That must have been kind of interesting. So you took, what, sort of 10 odd days away from the cycle at the start. Did you feel kind of behind, or was it maybe you have like a fresh approach and that's been quite good?
Yeah, it was my first weekend league. Got 18-2, so pretty happy with that. I did have better expected goals in the 2 I lost, but you can't win them all. Not with FIFA XG anyway, so it was good. I think it allowed me to kind of come back and reevaluate the way I was playing, not get like too stuck in certain ways. But the game didn't feel too different. I don't think there was a whole lot done at that point, but I think the patch hit just before last weekend league, so I think, definitely starting to see the effects of that.
And actually, let's just get into it. I know, actually, Rannerz, you mentioned 𝘍𝑎 on the content pod as your player review, so you've done that. We can hear from 𝘭𝑪 and Japes. 𝘭𝑚, first of all, anyone that you've come back to and thought, I'm enjoying this player?
Yeah, there's a lot of players I've been really enjoying. I've been using that Road to the Knockouts Thomas Lemar with the Powerhouse as left center mid. He's done a really good job. He's just very well, like all around, well-rounded player. Picked him up for around 70K when the market was way down. I think now he's like 115 or something. So nice bit of business there. Also packed on tradable that Road to the Knockouts 𝘬𝘃𝗲 at left wing. He's not great, but he is lengthy. So, slap the anchor on him and he just kind of runs up and down the line. Good for back post crosses as well. So, he's not great, but he's untradeable and he gives Messi and 𝘵𝘆𝑚bappé chem. So that's about all I can ask for.
How is Messi actually? Someone that I know people tend to wonder about whether he's going to be a player that's effective.
I thought he's pretty good. I packed him twice actually, the second time untradeable. So
what?
Yeah, give him a shot. I mean, this year he's not really worth quite as much as past years, but it was a nice 300K early on. So, I mean, not all of us can pack, 𝘚𝘅𝘅 or anyone like that. So
I forgot about that.
I've been reading the newsletter. So, but yeah, he's been good. He's been playing mostly cam in 4-3-3-4. Looking at his stats, 106 goals, 116 assists in 124 games. So he's not like an 𝘵𝘆𝑚bappé level player in this year's game, but he's definitely, you can make him work.
And what about you, Japes? Anyone you wanted to mention yourself?
Well, I mean, I gave Thomas Müller's Road to the Knockouts a shout. They gave him a pretty big boost, I think, with a couple other boosts likely to come. He's going to make for a pretty spicy card. I don't know how fodder ever changes, but like 90 rated cards, even fodder-wise, tend to be pretty safe. Coin sinks. Musiala was my pound-for-pound powerhouse, and he is epic and amazing. But the two players I'll talk about are my two current holding midfielders. The Road to the Knockout, Benacer, is like gives me old school 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 vibes. He's very good. So hoping he gets an upgrade. And then I went out and picked up the 89 rated 𝘵𝘀𝘁 𝗫𝗏𝘀 for like 300K and have been using him. And I almost sold him immediately. And I thought, no, I love 𝗫𝗏𝘀. I'm going to push through and see if I can get him to work. And now I've got the right kind of tactical setup on him that I think he's awesome. So really kind of a fun card and just a card that wouldn't have been usable in previous FIFAs. And I figure, while that type of card at least seems usable before any patch comes out, I might as well make the most of using, some of my favorite players of all time that seem to be working.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've used a player that I've honestly never, and I think this is a good indictment of the current game and how it's changed the meta. I use a player that I've used in past cycles plenty of times and never really enjoyed, even got his team of the season and hardly used it in FIFA 22, and that is Heung-min Son as an untradeable. And obviously at this point in the cycle, you get Son, you tend to want to use him. I made sure I got him on full chem, put a hunter on him, and I honestly have not looked back. He's been ridiculous. I think something like 54 games, 65 goals, and 33 assists in that time, and that's all rivals and champs gameplay. So he's really, really good. Obviously playing him as a striker, not a wide player, but seems very, very effective. And I think just the nature of shooting is kind of strong against keepers, but with the patch, keepers did get slightly better, and that's something that I was going to talk about. But I've found that he feels like pre-patch shooting almost. Everything you hit with power is going in consistently, and is someone that also dribbles much better than you'd think with their stats. And the runs he makes and the speed he has in behind, because he's controlled and not explosive, is really, really good, and have managed to get him in behind where perhaps other players wouldn't have necessarily been able to, despite his pace being good with Hunter, but not like maxed. And a quick shout out as well to 𝘵𝘃, who I also got untradeable, and the combination of the two up front has been really good. I think 𝘵𝘃 probably quite underrated this cycle, not had too many people talk about him, but Rannerz did. I feel like I saw maybe you tweeted about him. Is that right?
I did indeed, Ben.
Yeah,
I did
indeed.
Really, and that something about this year, and it's the same with 𝘂𝘃 as well. Maybe I just really like 5-star skills, 3-star weak for lengthy attackers. Maybe that's what it is. Honestly, I just think really good value. Pretty solid card, and I don't know. I kind of like the kind of stocky feel he has to him this year. I just feel like. Just feels powerful, so just really enjoyed him, and his finishing is very, very solid.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting. One question we had, which maybe leads on nicely from this, is from Finlay West, and he says, I'm as fed up as anyone with hearing the word lengthy, but would love this question answered. How much do the acceleration and sprint speed stats matter when a player is lengthy? People are just making anyone lengthy, but what is the lowest threshold that I should be considering? Someone like Kane, are they effective? Or Ruben Diaz? Is there a threshold at all? And I was going to say, Rannerz, presumably you're not going to be putting Diaz in your team just because he's lengthy over someone with higher pace. Or would you? If someone who's, let's say, controlled, 𝘠𝘅𝑬𝘰 maybe with a shadow chem style, he's controlled, would you be taking that 𝘠𝘠𝑬𝘰 with a shadow chemistry style over lengthy Ruben Diaz? He could also have a shadow, I guess.
See, I would personally, but honestly, I just haven't got around to testing it. I know a lot of people did like Diaz, but like Kane, Diaz, those sort of mid-60s kind of pace you're talking about, you probably could get away with it. I just haven't tested it myself, and I haven't really played against it much, right, either, so I'm not too sure. But I feel like what I know is 𝘵𝘃 and Ronaldo on lengthy when they're like low 80s compared to, say, 𝘂𝘃 or maybe even Haaland lengthy, that is faster, right? They are 100% faster. So I imagine it does kind of drop off as the pace drops off as well, which would make sense because if you've read any of the posts that like EA put about it, the pace stats are still hugely important. It's not just being lengthy.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I'd be interested to know what you think, Hugh, is down to the player's base sprint speed. And so you can have slow-looking players who can take advantage of lengthy because they have very high sprint speed. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think obviously pace does still matter. The lengthy versus explosive it can be nice to have lengthy if all things are equal. But if a player is slow, they're still going to be slow. If we're talking 𝘬𝘯𝘰𝘸 versus like some 90 plus pace attacker, like that's still going to be an issue. It can't just be lengthy and nothing else. But I do think it's just like lengthy makes some of those players, especially like center backs, the best version of how they can play. But when you compare, say, Araujo with Shadow versus Koundé with Anchor, they're both lengthy, but Araujo definitely feels faster because he has better sprint speed. So, it's the kind of the timing of when they hit that, top end sprint speed. And I think if a player is lengthy, that acceleration matters less. So you have those players like Van Dijk and Araujo with kind of that wider pace split. You definitely notice the acceleration less because they don't really rely on it as much. But I don't think it's just like a guarantee that a player is good just because you make them lengthy, that, you don't have to worry about anything else.
Because I had this interesting thing where I used Koundé with both Shadow and Anchor, and I genuinely, and it's obviously hard to tell because it's not like a very easy thing to compare, but it really felt like when he had Shadow, he did actually cover ground better to make interceptions, and interceptions are quite good this year anyway, so it's kind of hard to tell, but it felt like he was getting to things more. He was able to cover the shorter distance more effectively, to make tackles, to intercept. There is a trade-off, I think, and it's important not to forget that, I would say. Yeah. Japes, how are you feeling about this?
So my center back pairing is Smaldini, who I believe with the Shadow has like 83 sprint speed, so not even that fast. And I think he's like, that seems to be plenty of pace for the most part. And then what's bizarre about it though is I use 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘃𝗲𝗿 to go with him. And he is obviously not a lengthy guy, but I use him with Shadow and he just sort of eats like even the lengthy attackers for breakfast. He's very, very good.
Yeah.
And now down to like almost 250K, which is just a bargain for him. My most bizarre selection, I'm sure that people would be like, you're doing what? Is I use Trent Alexander-Arnold in my back line, like with a Shadow. And I would say like maybe the biggest liability, but he has a unique body type that seems to work like pretty okay. And I find that like he does get outpaced sometimes, but I have 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘏 on his side, and he just seems to like not be an issue, and his contributions going forward seem to outweigh his defensive, like I guess the level of liability that he might be. So I'm sure he'll get, if I'm switching players out, it's going to be Andy Robertson and, Trent Alexander-Arnold in the future. I'm sure those will be the first two to get swapped. But so far, both of them just outperform the like, this guy's not very highly rated, but he's plenty fast type players.
Yeah, I mean, on the last pod, we talked a lot about passing on fullbacks, and I think that is really quite important. Obviously, ideally, you want them to be fast too, but it makes sense. And then in terms of your tactics, I know you've changed them a fair bit. How are they looking at the moment?
I think the goal for me is always to find a formation that's very fun to play, that feels like I'm playing, like real football, or not necessarily even, it doesn't always have to be real, but it's like fun, where you can create like nice passing combinations and feels like balanced. And I have started playing a like higher line 4-2-3-1, the narrow with the 3 cams.
Okay.
Which is a formation that I used to play this way. Gosh, like it was when I was still doing YouTube. So I don't know, the early, like, I guess Fatal days, maybe FIFA 15-ish. And I sort of dug back out tactics kind of like that. And they seem to work pretty well for me against a variety of different formations, because I was trying to find a way to use a lone striker. And that had proved to be very, very difficult. But I've got the road to the knockout Thomas Muller on with a marksman on target man right now, and he just finds little pockets of space that all of the attacking midfielders can like kind of build off of with him. So I'm very much enjoying it and have had wonderful results with it, and felt like I can attack quickly or I can build up slowly. I'm enjoying it so far.
Great. And we should move on then to Rannerz. Anything you've been particularly doing tactics-wise you want to share? Do you have any tactics, I don't know, on YouTube or something that people might want to check out?
Yeah, you can see all my tactics literally on YouTube. Just search up Rannerz. But one thing I must say, and I think I got a lot of people complaining about the press this year because of obviously the nerf to left stick dribbling. And I honestly think having like a 3-5-2 or 5-2-1-2, something like that sort of setup where it's not a 4-back, honestly is really, really effective to get out of the press, because most people are going to have like say a 4-2-2 press after possession loss. And because it's like 4 attackers, when you have a fullback and matches up perfectly, you're in trouble. But when you have, say, 5 at the back or 3 at the back, you do tend to have one of your wingbacks be free. And honestly, it makes it a million times harder. Like every game when my opponent goes on constant press, I switch to that. And it just leads to me scoring a lot easier, and it's such a lifesaver.
Oh, that's a really good tip, actually. Because I remember a while back we had 𝗪𝘀𝘀 on the pod, and he was like, if you're pressing someone, change to their formation, and it will make it way easier because you get that matchup. But I guess, that's the inverse, right? You just switch away from it, and it's much harder to press. So, a really good tip, actually. I know a lot of people have been wondering about how to avoid pressure. Hugh, anything from you in terms of tactics, like what you've been running and things like that?
Yeah, my main tactic's been the 4-3-3-4. I just find it a bit more effective than a 4-2-3-1, with the wingers being like players that you can, kind of change the instructions on a bit more. It's actually fairly basic. I think I got it from like 𝘃 or something. But then I added on press after possession loss, made it a little bit more, pressing and attacking. But it's been working pretty well for me. Just press after possession loss, 50 width, 70 depth, balanced and direct passing, 50 width, 4 players in the box. Fairly standard stuff. I do find that the left center mid, even though they're both CMs are on stay back, the left center mid does get forward a lot. I don't know if that's like a direct passing thing or what, but that's why I have Lamar there. So he's, pretty good in the box as well. Helps with chance creation and kind of gives Messi a place in Cam where he doesn't have to do a lot defensively since he has low work rates. He's got a striker ahead of him and 2 CMs behind him. So that's pretty helpful. I know there's been a much maligned saga of me playing against 4-2-2 and struggling with it. So my main strategy this year that has actually worked pretty well is just having a 4-2-2 of my own that has press after possession loss. So I'm just going like man for man and just assuming I'm the better player, just relying on being better and not, any advantages that they have, I will have as well. And that's actually worked pretty well. I don't know if it would work as well like if I was playing against Japes using 4-2-2 or something, but for like most of the weekend league players I'm playing, it does pretty well just because it, matches up man to man. So if I'm pressing, it's like much easier to not worry about, where players are going to be.
Do you find that means you end up playing 4-2-2 a lot of the time? Because I felt like I played it pretty much like 60-70% of the matches I played in Champs.
I see it a lot, as well as like 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1. I'll only really switch to it if I'm struggling against 4-2-2. I won't always do it. Kind of just depends how good the opponent is, but it's there if I need it.
Nice. Well, on that, let's take a break and we'll be back in not too long with more gameplay chat. And actually, next week we'll be back with more gameplay chat on the supporter feed because it alternates which one is a supporter episode and which one's a main feed episode. This week you can catch the content on the supporter feed. It's just £3 a month to support, and of course you get loads of content over the course of the month. But also, at the moment, there's the 24,000 FIFA point giveaway going on the Patreon, so it's a great time to join. It's also keeping the podcast going, and it's very easy and quick to get the podcast into your podcast providing platform, the supporter version, which is ad-free too and releases slightly earlier. So why not? If you're interested, join up by going to bit.ly/23 points for the giveaway. You can also just search Support FUT Weekly or follow the link in the description of this podcast. Thank you very much as always for listening. A big shout out to those supporters, and let's get back into part 2. Hello, welcome back to part 2. We had the first proper patch of FIFA 23 last week, which we did talk about on last week's pod, but we will talk about again briefly here. I feel like there were quite a few changes, but maybe not the most significant changes. Actually, there's been a pitch note this week, quite useful for just highlighting a few things. Chip shots particularly actually seemed quite changed, which I wasn't necessarily expecting. And tackle backs, or the ball going to your opponent after you've tackled, does look nicely improved from that, so that's good to see. People out there have been saying that there are significant changes. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but Hugh, did you come back to the patch already being out, or?
I got back, I think, the day before the patch, so I did play just a bit more, and then the patch, honestly, I didn't notice that much different with the patch. There was obviously some things like that are kind of more situational, so you might not really notice them too much until those situations happen. Like, I didn't face too many people in Weekend League who were spamming certain long shots or things that would have reflected the keeper changes or, the passing. I didn't notice too much. It did feel a little smoother, a little easier for me, but I wouldn't say it was really significant. Like sometimes people say that, that first patch completely changes the game.
Yeah, it was funny last week because we, of course, talked extensively, Japes, about passing on the podcast, and then found during the podcast that passing had a patch. But I don't feel like it was a huge improvement. Yes, passing, I would say, is a bit more accurate, but it's not like a complete change in the way passing works. We're not like FIFA 22 levels of passing ease.
No, I haven't changed my play style at all.
Yeah.
Based on the patch. Like the same formations that were working seem to be working. I still find myself trying to prioritize simple passes, and have found, like, I use 𝘵𝘀𝘬𝘦 as my central attacking midfielder, and he is a little bit limited by his long passing for some of the passes that I would consider playing. So I try to play it, still a little bit simpler. I take 2 touches when I can, unless there's an opportunity that presents itself and the risk is worth the reward to play 1 touch. So I don't, I wouldn't read too much into it.
That makes sense. And then, Rannerz, what about you? Any observations from the patch last week? I guess goalkeepers, something that people have complained a lot about, but did they really change that much in terms of the outside foot shot? Not really.
Yeah, no, I think there was some minor adjustment. Goalkeepers slightly better, passing slightly better, but I mean, yeah, overall, you still score 𝘬𝘃𝗧𝗏 still work. The pass across goal, especially like the driven one that you do where the goalkeepers just kind of glitch out and just stand there, that needs to be fixed as well. So honestly, like, I'm not too mad about it because it was 2 slight improvements and they didn't really break anything, but definitely a new patch needs to come along to continue kind of on that progress that they've made so far.
And would you say, just from your perspective, that passing should be made less error prone particularly, or do you think we're in quite a good spot? Because I'm quite enjoying it being a little bit more difficult, or the need for better passers in your team.
Yeah, honestly, the only thing I'm not a fan of at the moment is the ground through ball. I feel is very weak to the point where I can have the perfect lane for the ground through ball, and I can have somebody like De Bruyne, and I think, yeah, that's not going to work. I'm gonna have to put it in the air, even though it'd be better to maybe wrap it around a certain way past a center back into like a lane. You resort to just playing it over the top because that's just more consistent and more accurate, which I feel like should definitely be changed. But other than that, no, it's okay.
Apart from, I guess, 𝘬𝘃𝗧𝗏 shots, right? That's still something that needs. But that's kind of obvious. Yeah, although it is slightly better because the goalkeeper's being improved, but it's not enough, I would say. Let's move on to this question because it feeds nicely off what you were just saying. Mac is saying, any tips on timing / modifiers / angles on through balls? Feel like every single through ball I attempt is blocked or intercepted, but my opponent always has great success with them. I guess you spoke there about actually through balls being a challenge, to be honest, anyway, along the ground. But I certainly noticed I've improved a lot, but certainly last weekend, not this weekend, I found that my opponent seemed to be able to play over the top through balls super effectively, and I just wasn't really seeming to be able to do it. They are more manual this year. They're semi-assisted. So yeah, are there any tips you have for people starting to learn that?
I mean, for the ground through, if I ever do resort to it, I honestly put it like 3.5 bars of power. It's like the only way I kind of get around that is I try to just power it up so much. And then as for 𝘵, he's mentioned like his through balls are getting blocked, right? So I'm not sure, does that mean like they're getting intercepted upon the like the completion of the pass and it's not getting to the attacker, or does he mean when he's performing it he gets like closed down? Just because through ball's on, you got to remember whether there's a midfielder right on top of you as well, and if that's the case, you just got to pass it off instead. The through ball isn't on if passing lane isn't clear like that. And if it's the other way around, then you're timing the through balls wrong. If like it's getting intercepted, you do want your attacker to be essentially shoulder to shoulder, right, with the center back at the time that you play the ball, just before he goes offside. Whereas I see a lot of people, and it's like one of the main things I have to fix in like coaching is there'll still be a few yards between the center back and the striker, and they'll just play the through ball like way too early. And then obviously the center back just cleans it up quite easily.
And in terms of modifiers, I feel like almost all my through balls I'm playing with the threaded through ball button. I do think if people aren't using that, it's probably worth them using it.
Yeah, for sure.
Hugh, how have you found through balls? Do you find that it's something. I feel like your playstyle isn't necessarily very through ball heavy, but have you found them effective? Do you have any tips for people doing them?
Yeah, I think that they're good at certain angles, and it's kind of, again, hard to describe. Like, you kind of pick it up more as you play, but really just in any situation where you have enough time to wait for the attacker to be right at the edge of the backline, like Rannerz was saying. Like, if you're being pressed and you're thinking, oh, this guy looks like he might be able to run past them, and you just play it, it's probably going to be too early, or someone presses you and you have to turn and then you play it anyway and it's too late. So I think a lot of the times that I'm playing a through ball is when I'm running basically completely free, and I'm just then waiting. Like, you trigger a run and you just, kind of stand there and wait, not standing completely still, but like, you're not trying to sprint full speed and like run into the defenders. You're just kind of taking your time, waiting for them. And then if the opponent switches player and cover the run, then you can just keep dribbling because you haven't started sprinting right at them to a point where they can really cover both. So if you're sprinting right at the person you're trying to play the through ball to, the defender can just stand between the ball and the player. If you keep running, you're just going to run into them anyway. So you're kind of letting them not have to make that decision. So by kind of just taking your time and waiting for the angle to open up, then it gives you a bit, better odds of that ball getting through. I agree that the ground ones are probably a little bit too weak, but I definitely try to put on a lot of power. I don't really use the right bumper version very often, but I do think the one with both bumpers, like 𝘵𝘃𝗃𝗃 and through ball, it's kind of like the threaded chipped through ball. I think those are pretty effective this year.
Japes, what about you in terms of through balls? Do you find yourself playing them? What kind of through balls are you doing? Any particular pointers for people?
I play I try to catch my opponent's fullbacks like out of position, like bait them in and then try to still play it down the line. I can't seem to like ever outrun players, but right now I have 𝘵𝘃𝗲𝘀 as my right attacking mid and 𝘵𝘵𝑏𝘃𝑎 as my left attacking mid, which, while 𝘵𝘃𝗀𝘀 aren't like, Alphonso Davies 𝘵𝘃𝗀𝘀. And so they often seem to get caught. So I find that I don't play tons of through balls unless it's like in the final third and I've managed to draw one of their center backs out of position and I can leave the pass in front of my striker to take a shot, or my attacking mid that's overlapping. Occasionally I'll play like a big over the top through ball, but if I'm playing them, it's because my striker has gotten enough space that I can play the through ball out wide and allow them to collect it and let the rest of my team kind of like catch up to formulate a better attack.
That makes sense. And in terms of defending through balls, I guess the question almost asks, what can I do to defend through balls like my opponents? And have people been finding that? I found sometimes it's been better to second man press the player playing the through ball and cover the run. But honestly, I feel like, and we've talked about it a bit, putting pressure on the person playing the through ball is kind of more important with how pace works, running it behind. Would you disagree with that, Rannerz?
Well, if you're close enough, I definitely, like, if you have time to get up close to kind of that probably midfielder that's playing it and try and put him under pressure, it's definitely the easiest way to cut it out. But, sometimes you're just not close enough to him and there's just no way you're going to get there in time. And then you just literally right stick switch to your center back or whatever and distract the run because there's no other way to stop it.
It's important to remember the explosive sprint mechanic, which is where if you're running in a straight line, you will go faster. And that obviously means if you can grab a centre back, run them back in a straight line, you should get into the space maybe quicker than your opponent who's not controlling the forward and therefore, probably won't be taking advantage of the explosive sprint mechanic in the same way and might not be able to direct the runners successfully. So, yeah, that is an advantage of switching to the centre back. Anything from your perspective, Hugh, in terms of stopping those through balls?
Yeah, I would definitely echo the thought of closing down the player on the ball. Although, if the player on the ball doesn't have pressure, you really can't focus on the ball that much. Like, if, say, they're running in 10, 20 yards of space, don't start pulling people out of position to pressure the ball because they're waiting for you to do that so they can play it into the space that you're pulling out of. It's kind of like a thing in real life football. You're not going to offside trap if the player on the ball has time, because then they can watch you start to move forward and just dink it in behind as you move up. So same thing in FIFA, that, if the player on the ball has lots of time, you need to be focused on tracking the run. Then once you can, for example, second man press or get someone near, then you can focus on stopping the ball, but really just track the run until they go off sides. Then you can move back and then focus on pressuring the ball a bit more. It can be kind of a tricky balance, but I see a lot of people see someone just running freely with the ball. So they just pull someone completely out of position, like 20 yards to go close it down. And then now someone's just like open where a center back's supposed to be. Like that's not really helping. If the player with the ball isn't a goal threat, you don't need to be sprinting at them unless, they're about to shoot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then actually, the next question we had in was from 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 about controller settings. And I thought we'd just whip around and answer, I guess, both whether you'd changed anything for FIFA 23 or had changed anything from the default. There's actually been an issue which has been resetting people's controller settings. I'm not actually still sure exactly what it was that was causing it. Sometimes it seems to be if I get disconnected, perhaps, from EA servers, that it causes the controller settings to reset, or if you play another mode within FUT. But it's worth looking out for that. Japes, first of all, any particular changes you might have made to your controller settings for this cycle at all?
I don't actually think there have been too many. I've tried a couple and then just sort of reverted back. The big one that I tried for a while was the semi-assisted shooting. And I just felt like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze on that one. So I'm pretty close to where I was in 22.
Yeah. Have you turned off adaptive right stick switching, which is like the new thing they implemented? I mean, plenty of people have said that it's causing delay, and I found that a bit as well. But basically, you hold the right stick and then it jumps over multiple players instead of just going to the nearest player. Did you turn that off, Japes, or is that still enabled as far as you know?
I still have it on at the moment. Funny enough, like it's one of the features that I'm like, I should figure out how to use this, because in theory, it's cool.
Yeah.
In practice, I don't find it perhaps like useful enough to keep on. So I will probably be turning it off.
Yeah. That's kind of what I found. And then was like, feels like there's some kind of like jitteriness when I'm trying to do it. So I just kind of turned it off and haven't looked at it. Maybe they'll patch it or something. Yeah, Rannerz, from your perspective, anything that you've changed from 22 to 23, or I guess have changed from the default in 23?
Yeah, once again, I changed to classic from adaptive. Because like my main reasoning, well, other than like the lag or like glitchy thing or whatever, is that like how often would you ever need to hop over, I would say 3 players, because honestly, the amount of time you can double flick is faster than it like you holding it to flick, if that makes sense. And I just feel like it would be such a niche scenario. And even if that scenario arose, you probably wouldn't even think of it in time. So I don't think it's a feature worth learning, but I could be wrong. Other than that, made sure like time finishing is on. The kind of basic stuff. Yeah, nothing really like different from last year per se.
And you're saying you're assisted in everything you can be assisted on, apart from crossing, I guess, maybe?
Yeah, I feel like you just have a lot more control over it, especially for crosses. I feel like if you have assisted crosses, for whatever reason, I kept getting like the wrong person for my crossing. And since I put it to semi, it started going back to the right player. Yeah,
I found semi is definitely best for crossing generally. But one thing I do want to point out, not specific to this cycle, but it's something I've mentioned before people have found helpful, is auto switch move assistance. Now, most people will have auto switching only on for air balls and loose balls, which is what you should generally have. But an important thing to say is I think people tend to go for either none, which is no auto switch move assistance, or high, which I think is the default. The thing about none is that if you're getting auto switched to a player running onto a through ball, a defender chasing it, then as it switches, whatever input you're doing at that moment it switches will be transferred into the player instantly. Whereas with low, which is what I go for, there's a slight delay there, allows you to adjust properly and to continue your movement with that player in the right direction and not kill their momentum. So I've always found it quite helpful to be on low. I think it gives you enough time as well to adjust the run if you need to. So just something to point out, worth an experiment with certainly. Hugh, what about you? Any tips for this cycle?
I think pretty much the same as everyone else. Definitely using classic player switching, as Rannerz said. I think it's just faster just to double flick. And I feel like most of the time, player switching's been pretty good this year. I've mostly had good gameplay though, so maybe that's why. I was getting those issues with like the delay with the adaptive switching. I think the issue with the controller settings resetting is if you play moments, because a lot of them are on beginner difficulty, there's like the game's coded that if you're playing on beginner, it automatically does certain settings, like it turns the FIFA trainer on. It resets a lot of stuff to like the recommended defaults, which a lot of times aren't really good. Because I've noticed this, because if I played 1 or 2 beginner squad battles to clear a red card, and the same thing happened in there as well. So I think if you play like any moments or anything, you need to reset your controller settings before you play anything else.
Yeah, I think I know the fix here. Don't get a red card to you.
I think the fix is don't play squad battles, don't play moments. So.
But no, yeah, that's actually makes a lot of sense. I think it was after playing moments that it happened to me. And a final thing I wanted to cover is pass receiver lock. I'm assuming everyone here will have it on late, which is the default and is, I think, considered the best. That's right, Rannerz, isn't it? Nobody in the pro scene has it on anything else.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody has it on late.
Gives you more control. Basically, you can change the pass receiver late, and you compensate for your opponent's movement defensively. That kind of thing makes a lot of sense. There is an advantage actually to having it switch early in some ways because you can control the receiver of the pass quicker, but late is definitely considered better. But interestingly, that seems to apply to goal kicks and free kicks, which I think is...
Don't get me started on that. Oh my God.
It's interesting because I think you were saying, or maybe Hugh was saying to me that you were saying it was bad or something. But I've actually found it quite good because it means you can dodge people trying to press your defenders from a goal kick, no?
Better now that when you know it's there.
Yeah, it was at the start. I conceded so many goals because I just didn't know it got introduced.
Oh, okay.
Because it wasn't a previous mechanic, so I kept conceding.
Yeah, okay.
For days, I was conceding so many goals.
I just think it's actually really good because the amount of times in the past I've been caught out because someone suddenly shoots their striker across the pitch to catch your pass with the goalkeeper. I've always actually driven past from goal kick to make it go quicker, but we're still getting caught out. So I'm quite pleased to see it. It just allows you to change direction if you see a player running across to mark your centre back or whatever. So yeah, pretty pleased with that. And yeah, pretty pleased with this podcast. I think that's probably where we should wrap it up. There is always plenty more to talk about on gameplay, and we'll be doing so next week. That will be a supporter episode. This week's supporter episode is a content podcast, and a reminder, actually, you can go back and listen to last week's gameplay episode. In fact, you can go back and listen to any gameplay episode since the start of the cycle if you like, and that's all just £3 a month. You're supporting the pod, keeping it going, and there's that 24,000 FIFA point giveaway going on the Patreon at the moment. So follow the link in the description, or you can just search Support for Weekly, or to go to the giveaway directly, you can go to bit.ly/23 points. Right, Japes, thank you very much for coming on the pod.
Thank you very much. If you guys want to find me, you can do so on Twitter at AirJapes. I will be releasing the tactics this Wednesday via my newsletter, P2P Snacks, which you can subscribe to via my Twitter.
Great. Thanks again, Japes. And to Rannerz as well, thank you very much for coming on the pod. It's been great to get your insights. And people can find you, of course, on Twitter. They can get coaching, all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly, man. Thanks for having me. You can DM me on Twitter at Rannerz if you want coaching. But yeah, other than that, hopefully I provide some value today.
Of course.
And I'll see you guys next time.
It's been great to have you on. And to Hugh as well, great to have you back on the podcast. Glad that you've been enjoying your return to FIFA 23.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been good to be back on and enjoying FIFA, getting close to the World Cup. So I'm sure things will start getting even more interesting pretty soon.
Definitely, yeah. Looking forward to it. And looking forward to next week's podcast, which will be out on the main feed on Tuesday. It's a content podcast. Looking forward to that. And if you'd like that podcast directly into your podcast feed, then do subscribe on all the various podcast platforms. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, and also, of course, on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, leave a like, very much helps out, and leave a comment too. For now, though, thank you very much to those supporters keeping the podcast going, and a reminder to enter the 24,000 FIFA point giveaway. Just search Support for Weekly. The giveaway will be right there. And a big thank you to those icon patrons: Dave B, Hugh J, Coach Vass, Alan G, Alistair, Anthony R, Dominic P, Rob P, Jeff B, Stephen F, Tom B, Damon H, David S, Nick Jack M, Eric T, Neil P, Adam G, Elliot M, Dan W, @𝗵𝗪𝗀𝘀𝘁, Roger D, Jake G, Springford, Nishant, Harry P, Alex M, Lee A, Brendan W, Andrew C, Joe W, Timothy J, Dylan, Adam R, Sam K, Graham W, Andy, Ads H2K, and Brian V. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. FIFA's a bit like life really, it has its many ups and its many downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.